Greetings wherever and whenever this finds you, and welcome to this webinar on unleashing the power of small business, brought to you by the Africa Report. My name is Nicholas Norbrook. I'm the managing editor of the Africa Report, and we will be with you for the next hour to talk about how Nigeria can unlock its small and medium-sized companies, known as SMEs in the jargon. I promise you, you'll be hearing that jargon a lot. But it is small and medium-sized enterprises. I want to thank our sponsor, Sparkle, a digital bank in Nigeria, and Sparkle's CEO, Uzoma Dozie, who sees his mission as unlocking the potential of this emerging grassroots network of SMEs. Using new, easy-to-use digital tools, these companies can really start to boost productivity, reach new markets, access financing, grow, and ultimately enter the formal sector, climbing the ladder to become the medium and large and very large companies which hog the headlines. Uzoma will be joined on the panel by Charles Odii, the Director General of SMEDAN, Nigeria's small and medium-sized enterprise development agency. We're very glad to have a political representative on the panel, as it helps us understand how the new administration under President Tinubu sees the SME sector. Is it the goose that lays the golden eggs? Many small companies prefer to fly under the radar and stay small for fear of the taxman, for example. So we'll be digging into that. It's something that we'll be talking about with Esiri Agbeyi, a partner at PwC. Thanks for joining us. Once those small companies are on the path to productivity, they often hit coordination issues. When you start employing other people, for example, you may not have the skills to manage payroll or understand how to deliver in Lagos, but when you start delivering in the surrounding states, things get more complicated. So how can we help SMEs take that step up? Zelda Akindele of Templars has a few thoughts on that, which we'll come to later. And finally, we're grateful to have two corporate representatives, one from each end of the size scale. Omoboyede Olusanya is the CEO of Flour Mills of Nigeria, one of Nigeria's leading agribusiness players with operations across the country. And Dr. Chibuzo Opara is the CEO of DrugStoc, a company that's leveraging technology in a bid to become Africa's largest last-mile distributor of pharmaceutical products. Welcome to both. Welcome to all our panelists. Normally on stage, I'd ask for a round of applause at this point. If you want to clap along at home or at the office, please feel free. We're very glad that you've joined us today. And I'd like to draw your attention to the Q&A function at the bottom of those on Zoom. Please feel free to put any questions for the panelists right there. Okay, let's start with you, Uzoma, just to understand why this crusade for SMEs and what does Nigeria unlock if it can get this approach to SMEs right?
Thank you very much, Nicholas, and thank you very much for the other participants for accepting to be on this. I think simply put, I mean, from a macroeconomic perspective, I mean, there's no economic prosperity without social development. And if Sparkle is in the business of, should I say, providing services to small businesses, then it's in our interest to ensure that, you know, we create an enabling environment with all the different stakeholders to actually do this. Now, even from a social perspective, you know, in any developed economy, small businesses are the engine of growth. I mean, if you look at countries in Europe, you will find that they're the biggest employer of labor, they're the biggest consumers of GDP. And so if we are to grow, and if businesses are to grow, and whether small, whether businesses like mine or businesses like Boye's, it's important that we create an enabling environment for that to happen. Now, we have over 40 million or so small businesses in Nigeria, a lot of them in the so-called informal sector, a lot of them actually under the radar, as you have said, and not, should I say, working at their optimum. And I think if we can, I think this is the right time now with the new age of digital and the new automation for us to leapfrog and actually drive that. And I think no sector can do it alone, and no business can do it alone. So it actually requires collaboration and coordination from small players, big players, public sector and private sector, and even the professional angle. And that's why you have people like in the consultancy and in the legal field on this panel.
Fantastic. Charles, you've seen firsthand really how successful SMEs take off. No doubt there's lots of hard work, great ideas, a little bit of luck, some capital, but beyond those internal factors, what are the external factors which are critical for small companies? For example, the policy framework that supports them, the tax regime, and maybe the incentives that they might be able to get hold of. And what's the thinking of the new administration of President Tinubu on these matters, especially on the tax question?
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me here. And I also want to thank especially Uzoma, who made sure that I'll be here today. The president isn't paying lip service to the development of small businesses in Nigeria. And if you looked at his mantra, one of the things that he's begun to do is basically to democratize access to finance for small businesses across the 36 states and the FCT in Nigeria. And he has set up a tax reform committee headed by Mr. Omoboyede, who is actually reviewing the national withholding tax, which will be exempting small business owners from paying withholding taxes. Currently, small business owners that do basically less than 25 million in terms of turnover are exempted from paying taxes in Nigeria. And so what the president is also doing in terms of just making sure that these small business owners have the resources that they need is providing a lot of capital in terms of grants and loans so that these small businesses can basically, be formalized and perform at optimum. Now, this is not because he wants them to, be brought into the tax debt, or just because he's basically thinking about how this small business, like Uzoma said, these small businesses are the engine room of small business of the Nigerian economy. If you take a look at just take a panoramic view of our SME landscape in Nigeria, I'm just reading from one of the reports from where Esiri works, PwC. Small businesses contribute 60 million jobs here, approximately 50% of our GDP, and currently about 39 million of them. We've lost a couple of them in the last 3 years due to some of the factors that we'll be talking about during this webinar. But again, answering the question in short, small businesses doing a turnover of less than 25 million naira are exempted from paying taxes. And there's this review that's ongoing where small businesses might, in the long run, be exempted from withholding tax.
Thanks so much. Zelda, it's a transformational thing, the suite of digital tools which have come out in the last 10, even the last 5 years, really. So maybe you could help lay that out for the people listening today. A business that maybe 10 years ago needed a serious chunk of capital can now be started at a kitchen table. SMEs are able to access markets they could never have dreamed of. How has digital changed the game for small businesses?
Thank you, Nicholas. And I think, that's an excellent observation, because even the very casual observer of the Nigerian market and even the African market as a whole can tell you that the last 5 to 10 years have seen this real sort of drive for digitalization, particularly amongst SMEs. Right. And there are a number of reasons for this and a number of ways we're seeing that. So when we look at the drivers for SMEs embracing digitalization, there are things like there's actually a changing consumer behavior there, right? So with SMEs looking to attract a wider market, their market is moving digital, their market is moving online. And so in order to capture that market and get access to a wider market, they themselves also have to go digital. Right. So that's one of the real trends that we've been seeing, and it's had a tremendous effect. So, for example, we're seeing reduced costs increase efficiency around operations, for example. But one of the real things that's been unlocked in the Nigerian market particularly has been around the fintech tools that are now available to SMEs. And this has had an enormous impact on the way that SMEs are operating and actually their ability to start their businesses and then grow them quite rapidly. So when we talk about these fintech tools, we're talking about things like, first of all, actually access to credit, right? A lot of the fintechs that are providing SME credit are using digital data to track creditworthiness, for example. And it's a lot easier when all of these businesses are digitalized. So that's one way that it's very, very easy for SMEs to access capital, which historically has been one of the barriers for those businesses to thrive. We also have, fintech payment solutions systems. Those have been an enormous driver for SMEs in the last sort of 5 years as well, really enhancing their efficiency and their ability to, service their customer base as well. So we are seeing a lot from the digital space that is allowing SMEs both to kickstart and to, we'll talk about scaling up in a little bit, but to grow.
Fantastic.
And just to continue, right? Because thinking about it, like I said, even the casual observer could tell you that there's been an increase, but I wanted to actually look at genuine numbers. And so I looked at a study that was carried out last year by ICT Africa, which is a research think tank out of South Africa. And out of these sort of SME businesses that were using smartphones and computers, they reported 2.8% higher rates of productivity, right? Now that's productivity that they simply couldn't have achieved without those digital tools. They reported 6 times higher sales levels. Again, those are sales levels they simply couldn't achieve if they weren't embracing these digital tools. And a number of them were able to actually expand their employee base, which from a digital perspective sounds counterintuitive, but actually is reflective of growth in the business. If you need more employees, then obviously there is a certain level of growth there. So we are seeing hard, real-time advantages coming out of SMEs embracing digital tools.
That's very interesting. And it's, Esiri, it's not just a productivity bump that we're seeing, not just in the accessing the markets, but also the ability to deliver an existence for these companies beyond their founders. It's that aspect of the digital tools which really interests me. You told me of this interesting example, a woman founder who has enough money from her trading business to send her kids to school outside the country. And these kids might then go to work for a Google or a Microsoft and maybe have no interest in mum's old trading company. And so the company dies. But you think that with digital tools, we can help companies, if not live forever, then at least have a longer life, and particularly become assets that contribute to the wealth of Africa's emerging middle class.
Yeah, absolutely, Nick. I think that's a very good example that you use because it demonstrates very clearly some of the issues that we face having such a huge informal sector. Largely dominated by SMEs. And we continue to have that percentage of the informal sector. But, questions need to be asked about whether there is a need to start to formalize that space and why there are barriers to doing so. And some of the reasons really sit around the inability for these SMEs to scale up, to grow, and become larger firms. There are several barriers that prevent them from doing so. And those barriers also become repellents, I would say, for the next gen coming into those businesses to work with them and grow them to become much more. And so what we do with my team is really work with private individuals to structure so that they can scale, grow, and then become a lot more appealing to the next generation to continue growth. With digital tools, I think one of the panelists already talked about it. It's just the ability for it to increase productivity also exposes those businesses to a lot more innovation. But it's the how, how do we start it? How do we get there? And this is where a lot of awareness is required, and also education. And so for some of these SMEs, whilst they may not know how to go about it, I think there is power in government also being that platform for them to leverage. So what kind of policies, what kind of awareness campaigns, can we use to bring them to a realization that plugging into the digital world, can multiply, I would say, the status quo. And we've seen that happen very often. You see businesses that grow to a certain extent, can sustain themselves and sustain their families, but there is a need for more. There is a need to expand beyond the current environment that they occupy. But how do we do that? And a lot of boxes need to be ticked in going past that rail, including also taking on board whether digital platforms or tools that can then allow you to spend more time on strategy within the business. And having done that, then start to look at employment policies and refining those to be able to employ the next generation who are probably now educated or have had the opportunity to leave the country, schooled abroad, and then can be attracted because you have spent time in building up an employment policy that can reward their labor. So we do a lot of this with family businesses to make sure they have that structure, can scale up, become larger businesses that can compete globally with other businesses, and then hopefully outlive the founder. And a lot of that goes into also understanding the governance structure within those businesses, from the corporate governance to the family governance, from the people, processes, and technology that's used within the business. That all gives structure to the business and then allows it to continue to live even past the founder. So maybe I'll just stop there and then get your thoughts.
Thanks, Esiri. I couldn't agree more. And I think the great success that East Asia saw in the 80s and 90s and still today is in a large part due to their ability to help their small and medium-sized companies get beyond the founder and start to introduce corporate governance ideas to help the scaling up. And certainly Nigeria's diaspora, I think, is a superpower in the world when you look at it. So reconnecting it with opportunities at home is absolutely a super interesting path. So I'm going to come to our two companies in just one moment to see if they recognize this picture that we're painting. But to help set that up, Uzoma, I just first wanted to ask you quickly what you see with your SME clients in terms of the financial stresses they are under. Because one of the barriers does seem to be their input costs have to be paid up front, but then their clients will pay them, a month, 2 months, 3 months afterwards. So they always seem a bit stretched. Is that something that you recognize?
Well, I mean, it's, I think what we call it in banking is spontaneous financing, using your suppliers' funds to actually as working capital. And so what that does is that, of course, you have receivables that you haven't got cash for, so you go and borrow so that you can actually now restart your working capital. Of course, that adds stress to your to the business. So one of the things that we're trying to advocate for, I'm happy, is like some good corporate governance, whereby blue chip companies, corporate organizations, as a contribution to creating that enabling environment for small businesses, is commit to make payments pay their receivables not more than 30 days. We have companies who have 30, 60, 90 days receivables because they're not being paid. But meanwhile, those distributors have to pay immediately for goods. So it's definitely an uneven playing field.
Absolutely. Well, maybe Omoboyede, you could speak to this. First of all, obviously, the blue chip corporates in Nigeria have a huge responsibility. Each very large corporate may have tens or hundreds of SMEs in its various supply chains. So I wanted to ask you, first of all, how digitalization has helped you in handling those supply chains where you're dealing with multiple layers really of SMEs. And second, we know that big corporates are themselves under pressure from the banks, from their own input costs and their own clients who are slow to pay. But do you think there might be the possibility of making some kind of effort in the payment terms, perhaps bringing it down from 60, 90 to just 45 days? That would probably be transformational.
It would be. I would love to see that. This is great to be here, and I'd prefer you call me Boye. Boye is my full name, but yeah. So Boye had been nice. I'll take the part about the supply chain and in particular what we do. There are a couple of key areas where we have direct interaction with SME that have a big impact on us as a business. We're a large FMCG business with a large reach and a large attempt to try and get goods to the consumer. We need to get as much consumer feedback as possible in order for us to be able to manage, from an efficiency point of view, our production cycle. That information really needs to come from the guys who are at the front line of interaction with consumers. We tend to be largely our SME distribution partners. So we need to support them in their ability to obtain that consumer information, which helps us on the production side, helps us to answer your second question, be far more efficient in production, and helps us to actually get to the market the kind of goods and services that the consumer audience requires. And that support enables the SMEs to be able to provide that service. So we actually push aggressively for a digital front end for them. The second is it actually helps us to manage out of stock or the availability of products, because if SMEs who are at the front end of our distribution channel don't have inventory management system, then we end up overstocking in warehouses, paying for those goods sitting down in places where they shouldn't sit and not being able to get them to the ideal locations that they should be, which actually adds to cost. The other thing, as we see in an economy that has its highs and lows, we're seeing some level of devaluation impact now. The biggest impact that has, and it's been spoken about by my colleagues on the panel here, is working capital, right? And how do you manage working capital for SMEs in that? Because without working capital as well, they simply don't have the ability to pick these goods from us. Now, if we don't get into a cycle of understanding their product movement, understanding exactly what is required, then it becomes very difficult for us to support them on working capital. The other part that ties to working capital is giving them digital products that control inventory, show their P&L accounts, allows us to support financing through financial institutions who can see exactly what's needed and where the capital is. So that gives them ability to get much better funding terms and ideal funding that's required. So for us, that's one leg of a chain that works excellent for us. The other one, I mean, the two others that I would use as examples, in movement of goods, you need transportation, right? And one of the things you need to do as well is to be able to track with transportation. People underestimate the impact of logistics as a business in Nigeria. And there's a significant amount of SMEs that play in the logistics space who need to be able to give you real-time information on where your goods are, and for you to be able to support them in ensuring that turnaround time for goods also works effectively. The last one, which is actually the biggest part, and I suppose Charles will be listening patiently to this, is we are a smallholder farmer nation, and that's not going to change dramatically in the short course. And you alluded to what happened in Southeast Asia. Southeast Asia's economic boom came from agricultural overproduction. which led to significant industrialization. So we need to get to significant agricultural overproduction. But we have a problem, right? Our smallholder farmers have farmed based on historical knowledge and based on historical information that has meant that they farm using techniques and technologies that are outdated. How can you support them by getting them dates for which they should put the right input? You know, farming is the same as having a baby. If you don't put the nutrients at the right time, at the right moment, the output is never going to be good. So how do you support them in getting them that kind of extension service information? This is the kind of input you should use. This is when you should put the input. When's your product likely to be ready? We can then arrange collection. We largely are off-takers from farmers. So we'd like to know, when is it ready? What's the volume that's ready? We can then plan off-take, which helps them to plan better and to be able to deliver the most important thing for them from an economic point of view, which is yield, because the real growth of agriculture is going to come from yield multiplication. And without getting some level of digitalization to get information out there, to enable the farmers to optimize their production, that yield multiplication doesn't happen. And yield multiplication for a farmer is simply the best economic gain that he can get. So I think if I look at that, that's just change or part of our supply chain that effectively works well and has been improved with digitization. Then you come back to us where I pointed out about, from an efficiency point of view. As you see economic activity and the impact on consumer purchasing power, the one thing that we can control is our costs. And the only way we manage our costs is by being as efficient as possible and by taking bureaucracy out of the chain. And that means having an open and transparent process from information end to end. And the biggest tool for that is a digital system. So that's actually what's driving big businesses, because they have to significantly control their costs, or else it becomes very difficult for you to be able to survive and have the requisite margin to be able to play in the economy.
Thanks, Boye. I love that you see the importance of SMEs as a way of getting critical market information for you. I think that's absolutely fascinating. And Chibuzo will come to you just in a sec, because I know you've got a lot to say on this. But Charles, just on this point of, might this initiative be something that SMEDAN would be able to help coordinate, given how important working capital is for small and medium-sized companies? Could we work with large corporates to create an initiative or a charter that everyone who wanted to could sign up to, like a patriotic CSR? We, the large companies of Nigeria, hereby agree to pay our SME suppliers within a 45-day window as part of our contribution to Nigeria's economic development. It would make a nice certificate on the wall of an office. People could feel good and do good at the same time. An award ceremony, perhaps. What do you think?
Absolutely. I think Uzoma was spot on. You're very spot on when you're speaking about working capital for small businesses, because some of the statistics that we've gotten show that this duration of large corporates owing small businesses contribute to some of the high mortality rates of some of the small businesses. So it's something that we are currently looking at, and we are currently looking at a policy that we will be unveiling in the next few weeks, signed by His Excellency the President, to mandate this working capital scheme, or this working capital credit signed into law, where small businesses actually are not at the short end of the stick when it comes to the supply chain and payment from large corporates. I think it will help with the working capital ratio small businesses are currently grappling with. I'll also just like to touch on what Mr. Boye has spoken about in terms of extension services and agricultural extension services. It's one of the things that we are very, very much saddled with as responsibility as SMEDAN, and we've begun to carry out something that we borrowed from the Japanese. The Japanese have something called One Village, One Product. And so we are doing something in that line called One Local Government, One Product, where we're working with these cooperatives, working with the community and the cooperatives to actually give them funding and knowledge as regards this. And the funding are broken into two. One is basically grants, and the 70% of it is a loan, but 30% of it is a grant. And this money is basically for work tools, for workspaces, and also for working capital for the smallholder farmers. And we're doing a lot of education as regards that. And I would like to talk about this sometime down this webinar.
Fantastic. Thanks, Charles. That's a scoop on this new initiative coming out in 2 weeks' time. We appreciate you sharing that with us. Chibuzo, you see these problems up close in terms of how to help small companies, the small pharmacies that you distribute to, manage their working capital. Just explain a little bit how your business was really enabled by the ability of having digital platforms, and then particularly on this point, how you've managed to do a kind of receive now, pay later style scheme for the people you work with.
Thank you for the question, Nicholas. Before I start, I'd like to also say thank you, Africa Report. Thank you, Sparkle, for having me here. Thank you, Uzoma. I think, for us, we started this journey about five years ago, and the digitalizing the space in the pharma community, it's not just about bringing in technology and hoping all will be well. I like to say that, or a couple of us like to say that, in a few years, you're not going to have tech companies. Every company is going to be a tech company. So it's really about, how do we all move to that digitalization space while taking advantage of the fruits of digitalization. It's not enough to have a few computers, have a distributed network in your system, be connected. It's more about the thought process, the agile philosophy, the mentality of trying several things, finding out what works for you in your own space, connecting to your clients, your consumers. I loved what Mr. Boye was saying about, being able to get the information directly from the consumers. And that's what digitalization is all about, faster speeds to market, faster responses from your clients, understanding in real time the data that you're consuming as a company, and being able to manage all that, while juggling your cash flow and your working capital. And talking about cash flow and working capital, I think, any business knows that, no matter how brilliant your idea, how wonderful your clients, without working capital, you're dead. Like, no cash, no business. For us, some of the things we've noticed and we've worked in the space, the pharmaceutical space is one of those spaces that has one of the longest cash conversion cycles, and different financiers and different institutions react differently. Some react by being more stringent, some react by, giving longer credit days, and it varies across the spread and the space and different climes. What we've done in our space in Nigeria, as a company, DrugStoc, we introduced something called DrugStoc Pay. We're working with a few fintech companies, some commercial banks, and what we're basically doing is offering pharmacies the ability to pay in small chunks of money over a period, enabling them to afford the cash flow. So what we're doing is actually reflecting how they collect their cash, as opposed to piling up cash there and piling up cash there and hoping that they can pay. I mean, nobody's going to be able to take out a huge amount of money to pay when the monies need to be paid. People prefer to pay in small amounts of money, as all the buy now, pay later options are showing on the market. So this is one of the ways we work with our pharmacies to enable them manage their cash flow, in addition to providing them, end-to-end tech products which give us visibility into their inventory flows. We ensure just-in-time supplies, so inventories don't pile up on their side or pile up on our side. We give them visibility into our warehouse so they can order and supply just in time without the product even touching their pharmacies. You can sort of cross-dock really quickly and they benefit the cash without necessarily having to pay for the working capital. Somebody else is carrying the working capital, whether it's us, somebody higher up in the supply chain, or the manufacturer. So with a number of our tech tools and our distributed network, we're able to sort of provide this end-to-end visibility, which then makes it even more affordable for everybody in the space to work. It reduces the inefficiency in the system, also allows them to digitally become more advanced than peers who are not using digitalization in their space.
Fantastic. Thanks for that insight. Okay, quick fire round. How do we get our micro enterprises to become small companies? How do we get small companies to become medium-sized companies? I need your ideas. Is it more training? Is it sharing a CFO position between 5 different companies until they can grow and afford their own? Is it tax breaks? Is it digital tools to help build corporate governance? Zelda, why don't you kick us off? We want to thicken the grassroots, but we also want to grow shrubs and eventually trees. What's the scaling up plan?
Sure. And I think it has to happen at 2 levels, right? And I was really pleased to hear Charles talking about the new initiative, because it has to happen at a government level, and then it has to happen at the SMEs level themselves. Okay, so at the government level, we've had various initiatives. We've had tax incentives and tax breaks. We have the Startup Act requiring, grants and things for SMEs. Now we have this new initiative Charles is talking about. But what we need to see hand in hand with that is a very high level of education, an actual penetration of the very, very grassroots, so that they understand what is available, both in terms of incentives and the government framework, and also what isn't available for them on a digital level as well, right? So when we have that, that's sort of the first level. Then you've got that education, you've got that widespread training. Then you come to the individual SMEs themselves, right? They have to, first of all, understand that they are in a very modern era of business. They might be small, micro, medium-sized, but it's a very modern era of doing business. And what does that mean? Yes, enhancing digital tools, but even beyond that, we've talked today in this about aggregation at different levels, for example, right? So I was listening to Boye talk about the logistics problem. That's something that could be aggregated, for example, amongst SMEs. We talk about administrative efficiencies that can be aggregated as well using digital tools. So there are a number of things that can be done at the individual level, but they need to understand that wider framework. So education and training, and then embracing sort of a modern approach to doing business with digital tools.
Fantastic. Charles, maybe you want to rebound on some of those ideas. What does successful scaling look like? And if you do have a toolkit, I mean, we've heard it's really important for that education about what is available to actually get out there. How do you communicate it to your members?
Thank you. So in terms of scaling, there are a couple of factors that should be looked at. How we categorize small businesses, medium businesses, micro businesses, and nano businesses are KPIs like number of employees, turnover, and its likes. So one of the things that I was confronted with when I resumed office was the fact that, Zelda has spoken about, government has a lot of role to play. And one of the things that I had seen was a lot of small businesses are stagnant because of the ease of even doing business in their states. So almost immediately, it's one of the reports that I took to His Excellency, the Vice President of Nigeria. And on the 1st of December 2023, he constituted a National Council of MSMEs. So what that council does is, that council is like a one-stop shop for anyone who wants to start, grow, and scale their businesses. So all the information that you need from the Nigerian government in terms of a standard organization of Nigeria, in terms of NAFDAC, CACs, SMEDAN, you can then find it in the Secretariat. And SMEDAN happens to be the Secretariat. I'm the Secretary of that council. So my job, which I report to His Excellency the Vice President every 2 weeks, is how we are helping small businesses ease doing businesses. If we can help them to ease doing businesses, then it can then also be easy for them to scale. And we can then look at those issues that help them not scale and address it head on. And that National Council of SMEs then cascades to the different states. And at the different state levels, the governors of the different states are the chairman of the council, and SMEDAN is that secretariat. So almost immediately, all the government issues from the government side, in terms of taxes, in terms of even shutting down marketplaces for small businesses, in terms of taxation, regulation, all of those issues we start to address head on. So one of the things that we need to actually put out there is that small businesses can come to these SMEDAN's headquarters, whatever it is that they're plagued with, that helps them not to grow, that helps them not to scale, that helps them not to move from where they ought to be, whatever issue that government can help. Because someone asked me, what is the biggest barrier for business scale or business growth? And I think that in one word is government support. Government can cripple, government can shut down even an SME subsector by just one policy. So that I think that's the fundamental thing, where we have this forum where we can discuss these issues, and then, like you said, now use gratification methods, see the states that are performing, the states that are supporting, the institutions that are supporting SMEs over the others, so that we can use that as a framework to inspire other people to support small businesses, to support their growth, and to see a lot of economic revitalization, even at the nano level. And then we can then see some scale to the micro and to the small and medium. And hopefully my goal is that they leave the SMEDAN portfolio to then become larger enterprises.
Fantastic. Esiri, in this idea about how we can find ideas to help scale up companies, what seems to be working according to your research in Nigeria and also in the wider region, and any other parts of the world which might bring in some useful ideas?
Yeah, I think just picking up on the point that Charles mentioned, I think the one-stop shop definitely, but also to the extent that, they can leverage this for interactions with governments. So in certain jurisdictions, you do have governments now digitalizing also their processes so that it reduces the complexities of bureaucracies that SMEs have to deal with in doing business. So let's talk about e-government, in several countries or jurisdictions that Nigeria can actually take on board. The other thing as well would be around protection of IP. I think SMEs are so because there isn't so much competition amongst them. So there's so many SMEs doing almost the same thing, but sometimes you can find one ever so often that dares to differentiate themselves. But what sort of protection do they have, for the IPs that they generate or the innovative ideas that they come up with? It will be very good to just strengthen those type of protections, have proper legislation that can protect them. Sometimes when we're discussing with medium companies who are looking to work outside, you do find that there is a lot of leveraging on IP acts outside Nigeria, just so they can either patent their goods or protect their IP as well. And then with that, they can start to command a lot more value in the products that they sell, and also can look at restructuring even the way they deal with, other multinational companies in the global value chain. So I think government also can protect the interest of SMEs in that space. And with that, we might see a lot more differentiation within the market space, and also start to see a lot more smaller companies competing at the global level.
Chibuzo, you are already doing much of this work with your clients. You've got a digital transformation program to help them, acquire skills, to help put them on an inventory management platform. So just concretely, what has that process been like for you? How have you seen your clients upskill themselves? What kind of journeys have they been on?
think in our journey to digitally transform our clients, I think obviously you always have the early adopters who don't really need a reason. They just jump onto anything that will differentiate them. But typically, I think it's usually the why that sells most people. When they understand that their businesses are going to improve, when you can show them, stories from other clients who benefited, and when you sort of need to also be ready to do a bit of handhold in some instances. But I think the why is what aligns everybody. Because without the why, you can sort of get lost in the weeds and just start digitalizing for the sake of digitalizing, which then ends up in a very weird space where everything is then more expensive and stressful for everybody else, where you have this multiple parallel systems that are conflicting with each other. So you definitely want to be focused on a lean thinking, agile type process, especially in the SME space. In bigger corporates, you might be able to eat this inefficiency for a while and tide over until everybody is aligned. But in small businesses, you very quickly want to focus them on the endpoint. You want to focus them on building those capacities or providing those capacities that are absent in the process. And but most importantly, the why aligns the owners, aligns the employees, aligns the vendors around, what they stand to benefit,
Indeed. Boye, maybe I will fold that question into one of the questions we've received about the risks of integrating smart farm technologies into agriculture. Often, we're talking about successful Asia, and I'm sure you've read the great book, How Asia Works, by Joe Studwell. It was a recommendation by President Obasanjo to me a decade ago, and it changed the way I saw the sector. Maybe digital isn't what a smallholder farmer needs. Maybe it's government assistance in creating cooperatives, and writing letters of credit for export, or providing tertiary roads in rural areas. So in all the different classes of SMEs that you work with, are there some which are more suitable for digital tools than others?
I'll answer that by saying I think all need digital tools. The question is, what do they need in addition to digital tools? And I think we should just understand that digital tools are what's called a necessary tool, but it's not going to be sufficient for them to do all that they want to do. But they need a platform that allows them to develop, and that's what the tool is. So for farmers, you still need road infrastructure, you still need access to capital, but you would also, in order to be able to drive yields, need information that allows you to deal with whether it's climate conditions, input points, water that you need to do, technology that you need to apply. All of those are bases on which you would need to drive or the benefits you'd get from a technology platform. But I'd say it's necessary but not sufficient. And the other things are needed in addition. I think to the earlier point where we're talking about what is it that would enhance the ability of SMEs, whether it's farmers or businesses, to take on digital transformation, there are two things. Charles alluded to ease of doing business. I think if we don't create an environment for the input, which is for them to be able to digitalize properly and to understand the benefits of digitalization effectively with training, plus there has to be the economic gain for them at the end, because if they don't get that, there's no return to this, right? It's, you need the process to be straightforward, to be understandable, but once the process is in place, if we assure them that they will get single-digit working capital available, if they go through the process, they should get single-digit working capital available that allows them to do what they need to do. That output is then what makes the cycle a returnable and a consistent cycle.
Fantastic. And just to stay with you a second, Boye, do you have in your supply chains any kind of programs to help scale up some of the people you work with?
Whether if you're talking about the SMEs we deal with, yes. whether it's through extension services or through Salesforce automation and what we do on the Salesforce side, all of those are geared towards actually supplying digital technology plus training and development for each of our SMEs that are involved in that supply chain with us. There's no point putting the tools in their hands if they're not trained and equipped to use it. And I mean, my success is really tied to their ability to use those tools effectively.
That does seem to be an interesting avenue for any government intervention, is to maybe reach out to larger corporates and say, how are you helping develop your SMEs? Can we assist you to multiply that by 10? That's maybe for another webinar, but certainly an avenue it would be great to explore. Uzoma, hearing all of this, what's emerging? Are there any ideas for scaling for SMEs, fundamental points that shine through, touch points that we can share more widely?
I mean, I think feedback has actually validates what we're trying to do at Sparkle. Now, I think underlying ingredient here is information and education, because how do you get from small business to a big business? You get there by making right and informed decision. Now, what is it that big businesses have that small businesses don't have? Quite a lot. So one thing we're trying to do is commoditize and democratize, professional services. So things like, tax management, inventory management, payroll, HR services, those things are actually expensive. So what we have done, beyond just providing banking services, which anyone can do, we've actually integrated all these kind of services like invoice, the basic things that you need to start your business. You need payroll, you need inventory, you need a way to invoice, and also a way to track your payment. What we're trying to do now is work with, the other professional services like legal services, consultancy services, because it is information that because any good business, always brings the lawyers into the conversation before they venture on a project. But a small business can't do that because it is quite expensive. But now with and what we're trying to do is integrate artificial intelligence into our solution, so customers can ask questions. What do I need to do this? And they can get intelligent answers to make informed decisions. Now, what is also good there, because what we're trying to do is make sure that you have captured data. So like you capture all the data that can be turned into information. So when you go to a bank and say you want to borrow money, they will lend you money at probably a better rate because they understand your business, because you're giving the right information. When you want other people to invest in your business, you can give them information, because all you have done is collect that data. That data has been collated for you, and now it can be communicated in a way that they understand. So those are the things that we're trying to create that environment for banks, and also create an ecosystem. I think one of the things that small businesses do is that when they start a business, they start looking for big corporates to do business with, right? Of course, they don't have the capacity, they don't have the experience, and also the capital, but they can start providing services to other smaller businesses. So we're also trying to create that ecosystem for them to grow through that ecosystem before they can now start venturing into big. So everything here ties into how do we collaborate and coordinate with, and also bring all these initiatives into one place so people have a choice depending on their context of what they're trying to do. So definitely it's a bit of everything, and there's no silver bullet, but knowing that these little bit underpinning it is technology. You cannot scale 40 million businesses or formalize 40 million businesses using manual ways. It has to be, understanding the psychology of the environment, then applying the appropriate technology.
Fantastic. Zelda, you have your hand up, which allows me to also ask you in passing, obviously respond to the element you were going to respond to, but we have a question. What percentage of Nigerian SMEs actually use digital tools?
Okay, that's a very good question. Unfortunately, it's actually a very small percentage, or rather a smaller percentage than you might expect. So, and I think what the statistics we do have available, just to address that question first, more or less break them down into segments of digital tools, right? So we have, of the micro and small enterprises that have been surveyed, about 38% of them use digital payment tools. About 23% of them use social commerce. And actually, I would expect that figure to be higher because we see a lot of SME retail business happening via social media, for example, right? We do have about 16% of SMEs using restock digital tools, and then another small percentage using digital tools for big bookkeeping, inventory, payroll, etc. So those numbers are smaller than might be expected, but I think that goes back to the question around education, training, and having SMEs understand that, this is a path that they have to embrace for growth. Right. But in terms of why I had my hands up, I wanted to pull a thread that Uzoma was talking about, and that was with regards to, I know you know what I'm going to talk about, and it's the legal advisory, right? And this is actually something I was going to come to later in today's session, which is that a lot of SMEs think about legal and other professional services as far too expensive and perhaps not necessary for their business. But the reality is one of the things that technology has allowed is that we now have these available at almost every level. So when we look at legal services, for example, and I think this is what Uzoma was touching on, there are a number of legal tech tools available online, tech kits for SMEs, right? And it might simply be that there isn't enough awareness around them. And I'm not just talking on an international level, even within Nigeria, with firms like Templars, for example. So you're able, for sometimes a small subscription fee, to access pro forma legal agreements that can be used with suppliers. You're able to access, terms of use with your own customers. They're able to, for those of them who have online businesses, access privacy data terms of use, for example. So there are online legal tools, and there is some avenue for having legal services from digital, online toolkits. And I think that's something that SMEs also need to embrace in order to scale up.
Thank you, Zelda. Charles, we've had a question about the effect of the money withdrawal tax on mobile money, the effect that tax might have on small businesses. Is that something you can respond to?
Yes, but I would just like to pretty much speak to what Zelda has said as regards the tools. One of the things that we've done at SMEDAN is also to license business development service providers, because we have approximately 40 million small businesses cut across Nigeria. And one of the things that we've started to do is to get these small business owners to meet with licensed people who can provide legal services, who can provide digital services, who can provide consulting services, as the case may be. What we want to also then do is, or what I think that we can do as a result of what you've said is maybe continue to do a lot of sensitization. And if you can also let us know what those tools are, we can push them to the community which we serve and see how they can be some form of adoption. And just looking at your statistics, I think that it is way
I think we may have lost Charles.
Can you hear me?
Yes, you've returned. Perfect.
So sorry. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you, yes.
Yes, and the question you've asked, Nicholas, is about the effect of taxes for fintech companies.
Yes.
So what I've explained before was there's a framework. Everything that is being done in terms of taxes right now will be reviewed, and it will be reviewed in the next 90 days. What the president has, what we've presented to the president is a lot of tax complaints from small businesses, especially those who are doing a lot of digital payments. And so what we're experiencing now are just short-term, just for the short term. In another 90 days, I'm hoping that at next webinar, I will explain some of these effects of taxes and effect of new policies that will be unveiled and as it affects small businesses and those in the digital ecosystem.
Fantastic. Esiri, we've had a comment about most small businesses being run by illiterate women, which are collapsing due to a limited use of smart business technologies. I'm not sure whether that's true or not, but certainly there is a gender component to this. You know, there seems to be many more SMEs run by women. Does that resonate?
Yeah, it does. So we've been doing a series of SME surveys, and in some of the surveys we've done, we've actually seen that you have a lot more women concentrated in the informal sector than you have in the formal sector. A lot more female business owners, I think about 50%, but then when you get to the formal space, you find it's around 12%. And I think the barriers to scaling is really what we've spoken to today, one of which is technology, but also the lack of awareness or even education to expand, rightly so. What we're also experiencing now is, as we progress into the Africa Free Trade Continental Agreement, you know, questions are being asked around how I can tap into the free trade agreement, you know, how I can access the reduction in tariffs as well, so that, you know, sales go beyond the current environment. And that requires education. That requires knowing the right authorities to go to, the right way those discussions should be had. So the gap will continue for as long as that education barrier exists. But I think, like we have alluded to on this call, these are things that can be solved, and easily so as well.
Thank you. Boye, maybe you can help us with this question we've received, which is about, you know, we can have well-intentioned government policies, but nevertheless that can still lead to rent-seeking or gatekeeping at particular pinch points in the chain. Is that something you've seen in the FMCG sector, in the agricultural agribiz sector, and more broadly, do you find yourselves with a don't know what the word is, almost a paternal role with regards to SMEs who are trying to navigate government policy and in some of the support that you have to give them in these moments?
Well, in terms of the later part of the question, the paternal, yes, because I mean, and that really relates to the point that Charles was making about ease of doing business. For corporates, it's very difficult to do business. For SMEs, it's even worse because these corporates do have some level of infrastructure organization geared towards dealing with that element of it. So we do have to play a role, whether it's to deal with, you know, just simply a transporter, you know, the number of taxes he has to pay just to move his goods from one state to another, ridiculous. And you end up having to deal with that. Now, in terms of government itself, I'm not sure it's, you know, whether it's arbitration, I think there's just a lack of understanding in government about the benefit that cause of creating an environment for SMEs to grow and the ability for government to actually get revenue from that. So there seems to be almost a thinking of I'll get all the revenue now, as opposed to if I grow the pie, I can actually get a lot more. Because if there was a thinking of I grow the pie a lot more, government too would be educating its employees about creating an environment for people to be able to work effectively. And so that would be hard to see. And I think, as Charles has said, it's something government needs to do. If we all understand that if we get to 3 and government gets taxes out of 3 instead of, you know, curtailing 1, everyone's better off. Absolutely.
Chibuzo, is that something that you've seen in your work in terms of helping companies navigate?
Yeah, I'd like to echo what Mr. Boye said. I think a very important component of building a thriving business space is about everyone understanding sort of where they fit and not trying to do the other person's role or trying to overly squeeze, where the goose that lays the golden egg. I think one of the interesting things is the more you become sort of compliant, the more you get, into the crosshairs of being squeezed and all that. I think it's important for everybody to understand, what the underlying drive is for the entire space to create value for everybody. And that is one important thing, and aligning taxes to, and all of that sort of infrastructure to sort of grow the business space, and not people to see themselves as in opposition to one another. I think I don't know that there's anyone who starts a business with the intent to not be compliant or not, grow their space or not give back. But it is, when you start to receive those blows from growing your business, whether it be from trying to thrive or just trying to survive and grow, you sort of get, lost in the weeds of just your day-to-day, and miss out, the big picture, whether it be from the government regulatory space or whether it be from you as a business owner trying to, grow your business. So it is important to realign. And I think in general, we don't necessarily have to follow what everybody else is doing around the world. Like, we can kind of create things that work for our own self. Who says the taxes have to be applied in a certain way at a certain point? Who says the taxes have to be applied at the beginning of the business or at the end of the business or whenever in the business life cycle? If you follow the cash flow, if you follow the movement of goods and services, you can actually find out where exactly to apply it, that it leverages the business growth, and everybody's then aligned on, this pot that we're trying to grow. If you create a pot, and out of that pot you keep giving and giving and giving, and everybody who's taking from the pot is like, I don't care what the pot or how the pot looks, then at the end of the day, you have business owners that are like, it's more, I'll just walk away from the business rather than just deal with all this hassle, Thank you.
Thanks, Chibuzo. Isiri, you wanted to respond to a previous point, I think.
Yes. I think the tax point definitely needs some re-echoing. One of the things that I think the government fails to also see is, with all of the tax rules that are issued by different tiers of government, whether at the federal, the state, or the local government level, there's a lot of burden that poses for the SMEs. And in a survey that we did, or an analysis we had done on the ease of paying taxes, we found it took about 343 hours for entities to comply with their tax payments annually. And that has a direct correlation to the drag in the GDP of the economy. So for companies that rank very low on the ease of paying taxes, you'd find that their GDPs are lower. Some of the issues that, again, the tax reform committee is also trying to solve is there's so many number of taxes that, every typical business has to deal with, about 60 taxes. But the reform is now looking at streamlining those to about 10. And another thing as well that, the system is fraught with is there are several tax authorities. So each state that you deal with has a state tax authority, and then we have one at the federal level. So about 37 tax authorities at the minimum that could easily be harmonized into a central one. And it goes back again to the Constitution, which gives all of these governments taxing powers. And so they go on end to just keep increasing those taxes and giving new names to the extent that it can accommodate or grow their IGR. So it's back to the drawing board for us, really, to say, how can we reduce this? But how can we also reduce the amounts that businesses have to pay to personal pockets? Because I think someone mentioned the example about a trader who's coming from the port and going to his business. There's so many levies you have to pay to Tautua on the road, or several local governments. that do not necessarily go into the government coffers. And those need to also be looked into. And the ripple effect is that businesses now push back by not necessarily reporting the right income. So you might find that at the SME level, some businesses do have two different books, one for the taxing authorities and one perhaps for raising monies. And that can happen because, there is no strong relationship amongst agencies. So there's no sharing of information. And a lot of companies get away with just, disclosing less than what they make. But that it becomes a problem way down the line when you want to list that business or when you want to then raise funds from the public, because you failed on all lines in terms of corporate governance, tax compliance, even just keeping your books right because you have double books, and then trying to breach that gap then becomes an issue, in the future. So always good to do it right, but then again, having that support from government, to make it a soft landing for businesses is important.
Thank you. Uzoma, you wanted to jump in on that? I believe you're currently on mute.
Yeah, sorry, we keep talking about formal and informal businesses, and this is just part of it as well. Now, we're living in a world now where you have to actually define what is formal and what is informal. I believe the reason why, and I think we'll be speaking to the reasons why we have informal businesses, because I think people are taking intelligent business economic decisions. If it's going to cost me so much to be formal, as in pay my taxes, it's going to cost me 300 hours, I'm going to have to do this. And those inconveniences outweigh the benefits from the incentives from SMEDAN, for example. They're still going to be informal. And so we have to remove those blockers that are preventing them from accessing those benefits from government to actually help them scale and help them to become formal. And that's a key issue, because there's so many incentives that government is giving that people are not aware of. But what they are aware of and actually get hit by every day is those taxes, those blockers that are actually not even in the end going to the government coffers. So you're going to have those businesses who are going to think, it doesn't make sense, it doesn't make economic sense. I'm still going to be where I am, regardless of all those dangling so-called benefits that are smaller than what I have to do to be formal. And so it's just a simple, remove those blockers, and then we can start seeing ways in which we can scale, get more people to, because formal is just removing some policies and actually doing some things, then you become formal. There's no road that you have to go through. You just have to just create an enabling environment and remove those impediments.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there, Uzoma. We are moving towards the end of this incredibly dense and rich session on unleashing the power of small business. But I want to get final thoughts from all of you, please, reflecting a little bit on one of the things that you want to take forward, perhaps. Charles, can we start with you, please?
Thank you so much. Let me, for the purpose of those that are watching, there's something Uzoma used to say a few years back. I don't know if he still says it now. For small businesses, they need to start to think big, start small, but grow quickly. But what I would like to just wrap this up with is this government is doing two things. One is we are listening a lot and we're collaborating a lot. So all of the things that, and I can show you my notes, right? I've just been taking notes on some of the things that I have to. I'm privileged to have some conversations with His Excellency from time to time, and then we're not oblivious of the times that we find ourselves in, especially for small businesses. So one of the things that I'm appealing with is, please let's try and be a part of this. Let's take advantage of this National Council of SMEs, where we can take real-time feedback from the small business owners, as well as consultants and many of the players in the ecosystem, where we can basically come up with better policies to help small businesses. We're talking about the blockers Uzoma was talking about, and Esiri. We're not oblivious of the fact that there are these people on the road. And when I was driving to the office a few days ago, I stopped on the road to ask because we had a town hall meeting and some of the small business owners were complaining about these guys. Some of the agberos is a term for touts. Some of the people on the road have some form of backing, and some of the backing come from some of the local government administration. And so when I was trying to inquire and ask some of the questions, I found out that they have some sort of remittance that go to the local government, and then it comes again to what Esiri was talking about, this lack of information and collaboration within the federal, state, and local government. The local government owners or local government chairmen just have a target that they need to meet, and they are however, by any means, those guys on the road have a quota that they need to deliver on a certain day. And then I kept asking questions, and so I found out that these problems are multidimensional. And what we're trying to do as government is try to solve these problems with this National Council on the Ease of Doing Businesses. So I'm extending, and I'm hoping that we can get more people to respond to this. I can get more of these complaints. I can get more of this, and then I can table it in a memo that we can help drive better policies. Some policies will be unveiled, like I said earlier. And when they're unveiled, I will take time. I hope that I can invite it again to explain why we arrived at this, the science that are arriving at this, and then what the ripple effect would be for small businesses, especially for those in our ecosystem. So again, for people that are watching, who are small business owners, please think big. And for everyone else, we are here to collaborate. It's a system. We're here to talk. We're here to work with you. We don't see small business owners as our enemies, and we don't see them as cash cows. And also, the taxes many times are not deliberately there to hurt the small business owners, which is why many of them want to remain informal. One of the things that we're also doing is providing, we're democratizing access to finance so that many people, and releasing a lot of incentives so that many people can be formalized. And one of which is a single-digit interest loan that was signed in the sum of 5 billion naira, where small businesses can take this money and pay back, 9% at zero collateral. One of the problems that we've had with even disbursing that is some of the things we've spoken about here. Many people are not keeping their books. Many people are not even formal, and so it's not a thing of, do I take government incentive and get into the tax net, or just remain informal? And if you are there and asking that question, please take the government incentive, because we're not fighting. We're not here to fight. We're here to enable. And this is why I've gone into business to enable a lot of small business owners, because I was a small business owner as well. So please, we're here. We're listening. We're here to collaborate, and then we're here to make this better. And I'm sure that by the time that we're having this conversation again, we'll have some indices that have changed based on the key performance indices that we're tracking for small business owners. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Charles. Boye, your final thoughts, please.
Well, I think it's just that Charles should note that we recorded everything he said and we'll be playing it back in the years to come. No, but yes, it's good to understand that there needs to be a significant amount of collaboration. Look, ultimately, all of us are players in an economy that we will benefit from if it grows rapidly. The more purchasing power exists in this economy, the better business for everybody and the better opportunities that exist. The things that we need to do to unlock that purchasing power, when we talk about infrastructure, ease of doing business, and in that is enabling small businesses. There's no country that doesn't drive. You spoke about how Asia works. The UK used to be called a company of small shops. It's the biggest driver, and it's important that there's a front burner issue that says we have to address their issues and we have to create an enabling environment for them to perform. Now that also relates to all the other things that Charles said. Government needs to do its part. We also need to do our part because we've got certain organizational structures that support in allowing them to thrive. But I think once we come to that conclusion that economic growth and economic drive, and then a big driver for economic growth is the development of the SME and their ability to perform, and we collaborate in doing that, I think we'll be a long way towards getting the $3 trillion economy we keep talking about.
Thanks so much. Zelda, final thoughts, please.
Thank you. I think most of us have really kind of, expressed it very well. But I think what I would like for, anyone listening, watching, and for the majority of SMEs to really take away is what is the cost here? What is at stake, right? Because we do look at the Nigerian economic segments, we look at the population demographics, and the reality is that Nigeria is by and large driven by the SMEs on a very, wide scale across retail, agriculture, commerce, so many of it. But there is a lot at stake if we do not have the SMEs come into the more formal sector, being able to access credit and, and embracing digital technology. So what is at stake will be increased transaction and operational costs for them. It will be barriers to credit. It will be barriers to a wider customer base and visibility. In essence, it will be a stifling of growth. So whether it is kicking and screaming, we have to drag the SMEs into digitalization in order to ensure that that growth and that scale up that is so desperately needed actually happens.
Thank you. Chibuzo, you're not kicking or screaming, but it'd be great to get your final thoughts. Thank you.
I think for anyone listening out there, this webinar has been a very succinct sort of distillation of what is happening in the space. What I don't want people to do is to get confused about the last 5 years and miss out on what's going to happen in the next 5 years. Technology for the first time has become so democratized. It's made so easy, and we're in this inertia where people are still not really realizing what has happened. And I think the next 5 years are going to demonstrate where the world can go. And I think Nigeria is well poised with the population of young people to take advantage of that. Now, Zelda mentioned some of these blockers, and I think it's very important for SME owners to step out of their day-to-day box and try to understand what is available for them to make things happen. Because, instead of doing this, to touch your ear, you should be thinking about just simply, doing that. And there's a lot of tools today that can help you do that. On the side of the government, I think it's important for government to take a step out of their, regulatory space and understand, just like Mr. Charles was doing. I think a lot more agencies sort of need to do that, to just understand what the pains of the individual businesses are from the perspective of the tax person. One final word I'd like to say is, I wish the taxes can become more than just financial bottom lines. If the taxes have triple bottom lines, just the way we're forcing our businesses to start thinking about sustainability and governance and ecosystems, the taxman should also start thinking about sustainability of the spaces they're taxing, and start thinking about, how will that space survive the next 30 years? Because if you're only focused on financially, I don't want to use the word extracted, but if you're only focused on the financial, value that comes out of the system, eventually that system dies. It's not, finances are the secondary result of providing value to stakeholders. And so tax people should also be aligned to that value and not just the finances. Finally, I think don't digitalize for the sake of digitalization. Digitalize because you want to transform your businesses. Thank you.
Thanks so much. And it's absolutely true that we forget that it's changed so much, but it will change so much again. It's in permanent flux. Esiri, your final thoughts, please.
Yeah, I think it's important that we understand that the SME population is also very heterogeneous. So whatever policies or solutions that one may come with must be very well thought through, and that in designing those policies as well, those complexities are taken on board. Policymakers definitely have a key role to play in having SMEs or helping them adapt their processes to the digital world. I think we've said most of that today. One of the group or subsets that I'd also like to highlight here is just about family businesses. So most of these SMEs go to the heart of the families that own them. And sometimes growing those businesses becomes something of a passionate venture for them. Trying to be on that same wavelength and understanding that, there are other roadblocks apart from the tangible items, such as the financial issues, is important. And a lot of intangible assets are required to grow businesses. So I think just bearing in mind the heterogeneity of that population is critical, so that as we make policies and execute them as well, we take them on board and ensure that, these businesses can grow beyond the founders of the businesses or the families behind them.
Fantastic. Uzoma, the last word is yours.
Thank you very much. I think this has been very fruitful, engaging, rich conversation. But and just to encapsulate what everyone has said, I think for me it's and we talk about how do we scale these businesses, how do we move from informal to formal. I think the underlying foundation is trust and transparency. I think for us for there to be trust, and trust is not about people, trust is about processes. People expect things to. If they press a button, they expect certain things to happen. It is when, if one person presses it, something else happens, and then another person presses it, and another thing happens, then there's lack of trust, right? So it's about the process and about certainty. And I think on the transparency bit, it's about technology and digital. If we're going to make better decisions, then there must be transparency. And so we don't know, there's too many uncertainties, and that's why people are in the dark, right? How much am I going to pay in taxes? How much tax am I going to pay this year? How much tax am I going to pay to certain people? What is going to happen? So I think by just creating that enabling environment and people coordinating together, do the things that are going to allow us to even invest more in this economy, see where the uneven places are, and then smoothing it out as an ecosystem. But I think it's beyond. I think for me, it's small business are the engine of growth. And so, everyone has said, even all the stakeholders, the taxman, the big corporate business, regulators, private sector, and the individual, these are the people that employ people, create consumption, and also help keep the society safe. So, and that's how I will end that. And that's what we're trying to do at Sparkle, help create that enabling environment and also advocate for a better environment for them.
Thanks so much, Uzoma. Thanks, Sparkle, for sponsoring this conversation. Thank you to all our participants. It's been a very rich dialogue. Thanks for your time. I really do appreciate that. Thanks to all of you who've been watching. I hope you take something interesting into your day. We at the Africa Report are part of a wider group which puts on the Africa CEO Forum each year. The next one will be May 16, 17 in Kigali, Rwanda. And we're going to take these themes about how to help nurture small businesses and how to integrate them better into the supply chains of the big corporates who will be present at the Africa CEO Forum. So thank you very much. We'll play a short video now explaining the forum, and that marks the end of this webinar. Thanks for listening.
The annual Africa CEO Forum.
L'Africa CEO Forum.
Africa CEO Forum.
Le Davos africain.
Biggest event of its kind on the continent.
Si nous arrivons à faire du beurre et de la pâte de cacao, nous pouvons créer un genre d'OPEP chocolatier.
Be building a pipeline of CEOs that by the time they're between 30 and 35, they're ready to take over as CEOs and run companies.
Really so surprised and excited to see so many people from all over Africa.
We need to put these these women into positions that will help build their leadership so that when they get into the workforce, first they have the appetite, but also they are being supported throughout.
I see a huge opportunity for the continent to come together.
Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Nick. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.